but I have a full house here, which is really great. And so I will be, I trust, a breath of fresh air for the next 30 minutes until you have your anticipation of this vote. Thank you. And also, as I think somebody just mentioned, it's a historic week. It's been a historic week. We're making progress, and I just have to acknowledge that because it's really powerful and important in our history as a country and in the world. And the other thing is we don't have to say gay marriage anymore. We can just say marriage, right? Yes, let's clap for that. So this past week, gosh, so much is happening on the planet, and this past week my heart has been a little heavy. I don't know about you, but the news seems to just fly by things. Everything is in your face for maybe, 2 or 3 days, and then it's gone. And then the wounds and the pain and the sorrow of what's happening in the world is still lingering in the hearts and the minds of people in Charleston this week, this moment. And so I want to bring that into the room because I really think that it speaks to my topic today, the sacred amidst the shadow, of race consciousness, of what's happening in the world today. Because what we understand in this teaching is that what we're seeing in the world is just a direct outpicturing of what's happening in consciousness within us. Because what we understand is that everything happens in consciousness. So I want to bring Charleston into the room. And I also want to mention that, Dr. Ken Gordon says that we can't heal what we don't acknowledge. And so we're finally acknowledging these things. We're finally looking at the shadow. And I think it's so important, especially in our teaching, because so often we don't talk about the shadow. We talk about denying the condition, not giving the condition power, which is, in essence, yes, very true. And yet we have to acknowledge what's actually going on in order to turn to the truth with a capital T of what we know. So last weekend, I made the decision that I wanted to experience the shadow firsthand. And so I went to the Donovan Correctional Facility in San Diego, out in the middle of nowhere, to visit an inmate that I've been writing for a while. And it was the first time he's had a visitor in 20 years. Can you imagine? And I thought, wow, I'm going right in. And so there was a lot of fear and a lot of concern leading up to this experience. And I wanted to see it for myself because, people in prison, they're like the unseen. It's like the shadow at its greatest. And so I got there, and I got into the room, and I sat there for the first 20 minutes waiting for him to come out. And it took everything in me not to just lose it. Because I could feel the power of that moment for him, but also it was right in my face. Can I see God? Can I see the light? Can I see the presence of goodness here in this room? No doubt I could feel it. It was everywhere. I blew my own mind because I had all this judgment of my own projections of what I was going to experience in that room, and it was so powerful to be sitting there with him and all the other people in the room thinking, gosh, it doesn't have to be like this. It doesn't have to look like this. And so as a community, in your local community, and as global citizens in the world, I think it's really up to us to ask ourselves, what is mine to do? What is mine to do? Sometimes in religious groups, we tend to be pacifiers or tend to be passive. And in my generation, it's no longer doing that. And I know some of our baby boomers understand this. Back in the 60s, people were getting up and the social justice was a big deal. And now, to me, it's humanity. We can't ignore these things anymore. So as Reverend Maggie was saying, I was in Ukraine last September. And I had just moved to the Bay Area, and I was nesting, and I was enjoying my time getting settled because for the last 3 years I've been traveling the world. And I was called by Reverend Barbara Leger, our minister in Ukraine, and she said, Savanna, I need you to go lead our annual peace conference in Ukraine. I can't go, and it's at the very last minute. It was 5 days before her conference. I said, are you crazy? There's a revolution going on in Ukraine right now. Why would I want to get on a plane right now? She said, because you're the only one who knows my culture. You're the only one who speaks the language, who knows what it would take to lead this conference. So I very resistantly and hesitantly said yes. And here I am standing at SFO, got my bags, I'm at the gate, And the guy is checking in a couple before me, and they're going off to Hawaii. And he's like, have a great time. You know what's coming. And he looks at my boarding pass, and he looks at me, and he says, are you sure you want to go there? I kid you not. I said, yes, I am going. I got myself to the airport. This is happening. So I find myself on a layover in Switzerland. And at this point, I'm quite delirious. And I get on the plane to Ukraine, and it's empty. It's half empty. Nobody is going to Ukraine. And I'm thinking, why did I do this? Why did I decide to do this? So here I am, arriving in Ukraine. A beloved taxi driver friend of mine who I've known for over 10 years greets me. He takes me into a wooded area where we're having this conference. And on one of the evenings there, we did a process. It's a nurturing process that our teens love at our teen camp. And it's called AB Love. And what it is it's a group of two groups. And the first group creates like a circle, and they have their eyes closed and their hands to their side. And the other group comes in and they nurture them by hugs and words of affirmation. And so you have to understand that 10 years ago, when I first did this process with the youth of Ukraine, they were extremely resistant. That old Soviet stuff is still lingering. And they looked at me and said, we do not touch each other in this country. We do not do this here. And 10 years later, you look at their community and they love it. They can't get enough of it. So here we are doing this process, and the sun is setting. There's candles out on the ground. And all of a sudden, out of the corner of my eye, I see a group of people walking towards us. And I'm like, uh-oh. This is a public event. What am I going to do? This is a sacred gathering. And all of a sudden, these little ones, 5, 6 years old, they come into the circle without any instruction from me. They close their eyes and their arms are wide open. And then everyone else joined in. And what I found out later is that these were Ukrainian refugees from eastern Ukraine who had been displaced from the war. And I was able to talk with them about their lives and what's been going on in their country. And so there was a moment where I said, I was absolutely here by divine appointment. You know, that happens sometimes in our lives, you know. We make a decision and we don't always know that it's in alignment with our true purpose and our way. But it was absolutely clear that I was there to bring light into the midst of a dark place, and that it wasn't what I expected. It wasn't what I thought it was. So how do we embrace the shadow and the darkness when it arrives on our doorstep? It's really the question. How do we embrace conflict and challenge? What do we do with it when it arrives in our lives? Well, we have to look at it. As I said earlier, it's a scary thing sometimes to look at our shadow, isn't it? It's not fun. But it's where some of the richest growth happens. Michael Beckwith, the founder of Agape International Center, says the power within you is greater than the power in the world. The power within you is greater than the power in the world. But we get so caught up in the world, don't we? We get so caught up in needing external validation from the world, thinking that our joy and our good and our love and everything outside of ourselves exists out there, when really it's all in here. Because as I said, we project that into the world. So what's happening out there in consciousness is just what's happening within us. Michael Beckwith also says that sometimes the unknown is thwarted by our togetherness. Because we think we have everything figured out, right? We think we're in control, that we have a plan for our lives, and we think we know how it's going to turn out, and then something happens. Right? And it's like, what? I didn't expect that blind spot. I didn't expect that to happen. And so sometimes it requires us to have to go into a dark place. It requires us to have to step into the unknown so that something more amazing and profound can happen for your life. Michael also says the worst day in the life for the ego is the best day in the life for your soul. The worst day in the life for your ego is the best day in the life for your soul. And when I first heard that, I was like, no. Because there have been times in life where I'm like, no, why is this happening? But again, it requires us to cultivate something within us to allow us to move through it. It requires us to cultivate qualities of faith and patience and trust and perseverance and a commitment to our spiritual practice. So something really cool about this. How many of you were able to read it back in February? Science Mind magazine, yeah, okay. So this was such an incredible, humbling thing. And what's so cool about it now is that I can quote myself. So, so I'm going to. We must trust the creativity of the darkness, the holy unknown places, for they bear rich fruit when we've released our attachment to the way that things must be. So back in 2012, I was in the midst of a revolution in Egypt, and I had just arrived after they had overthrown Mubarak. And I was there with my beloved at the time, and it was a terrifying time. I felt like I couldn't breathe, and the consciousness was so heavy. And I had a hard time leaving the apartment most days, and I would go out into the market, and I would be followed or harassed or talked to all the time. Egyptians are very friendly people, but they're very curious. And there were fires burning in the streets. There were tanks and guns and all kinds of just warlike types of things. And it was volatile. It was one of those things where I never knew what was going to happen when I went out. I never knew from one minute to the next if something crazy could happen. And things crazy did happen. But what that experience revealed to me was that when I was stripped from all of my ego identifications and the labels and the accolades and all these great things that I've been told about myself in this country, I was stripped bare. And I was able to see, because I was so exposed, the rawness, the stuff within me that I hadn't worked through in prac. And we all think, oh, I got over that. I'm done with that. And then it rears its head again, right? You think you're through something, and then it appears again. Well, Egypt was a great mirror for me. It was a great mirror because it triggered all of those unhealed aspects in ourselves. And that's what happens in our lives. People and situations and relationships, they trigger us into looking at those disowned aspects. The shadow, the disowned, the unconscious, the unhealed parts of ourselves that we don't want anyone to know about. And so I had all this anger and rage. And what I realized that what was out picturing before me was absolutely what I was experiencing inside, this inner turmoil of, I'm going crazy. But it was such a gift to me. And so we embrace the shadow by looking at it as a gift. I've had people ask me, Savanna, how do you know when you're through something? Like, how do you know when you're over something or you've forgiven someone? And I think for me personally, it's when I can see the gift on the other side. When I can see the gift of how it supported my life and it got me from here to here. Because you look back on your life and you see how all of these things now make sense when at the time they were so painful that they didn't, but they've made you who you are now. It's such a powerful realization. And so darkness is a gift, seeing that, this experience taught me a lot about myself. It taught me a lot about surrender. It taught me a lot about letting go of who I think I am, to embrace something more magnificent than I could have ever known. So it's a gift, and the other thing is that the shadow teaches us to think about where we're putting our attention. Where is your attention in your life? Is it on the good and the joy and the wholeness? Or is it on the lack and the limitation and the worry, the scarcity? They say that the 5 people that you hang out with the most, you start to become like them. So who are you hanging out with? Who are the 5 people in your life that you're with the most? You might want to reconsider who you're hanging out with. It's true. Where's your attention? Also from the magazine, for all of us, we are always getting the opportunity to surrender moment by moment to the presence, to love itself, to something greater that we can even rationalize or think of. It also requires us to have stronger faith muscles. It requires us to remember our solid foundation of who and whose we are, of the divine expression of life, knowing that God is all there is, knowing that I have a connection to this source. What happens is when we get off kilter and we become misaligned, it's an opportunity for us to remember our faith, for us to remember, who am I and whose am I? I'm connected to this one life. We say this mantra, there's only one life. That life is God's life. That life is perfect. That life is my life now. Let's say that again. There's only one life. That life is God's life. That life is perfect. That life is my life now. I said that mantra the whole way from Switzerland to Ukraine. I did, I swear. It was the one thing that brought me back. And so it's important when you're going through a really challenging situation or time or having a challenge at work, whatever it is, that you're able to remember your solid foundation. What is it that brings you back when you're off? What is the quality that you're being asked to cultivate right now? For me, it was actually a quality of flexibility with life, a quality of gentleness, and also a quality of assertiveness. What I recall is that I needed those things to survive living in Egypt. Things that people would have said, oh, that's so bad to have, but it helped me get through that experience. So we were headed once down to the southern part of Egypt, if you've ever been down the Nile near Luxor, and we were trying to find a taxi to get out into the desert to my beloved's home at the time. And it was a challenging time because there was no oil, or so they said, and we couldn't find someone to take us. So we found this kid who was willing to take us for double the cost. And we start to go out into the desert, and all of a sudden we go across a checkpoint, and his car stalls. Normally it wouldn't be a problem, but they see a foreigner, white, blonde, in the back seat. And they start to think, oh, he must be kidnapping her. So they ask him to get out of the car. And I'm sitting there like, oh, really? Like this again? After 8 or 9 months, you start to have, there's a wall, there's a strength built up by then. So I'm like, oh, we got to go through this again. And so they start interrogating him and asking him a lot of questions. And it seems pretty bad. And so I start just getting centered. I come back. I sit in my calm place, in my silent space. And all of a sudden, they start laughing. And I'm like, what is going on? He gets back in the car, and we drive a different direction. And I asked him later, what was that about? He's like, oh, I just flashed them my UN card, and he let me go. I told him I was an ambassador for Egypt. And they believed me. Yeah. I thought, wow, well, you were creative. That's great. You see, we never know in life when we're going to hit that brick wall. We never know. And so we can control this right here. Regardless of what's going on in the world of effect, we are at control of our peace of mind. Ernest Holmes says, thought which is built upon a realization of the divine presence has the power to neutralize negative thought, to erase it, just as light has the power to overcome darkness, not by combating darkness, but by being exactly what it is, light. And in the Bible it says, and the light shineth in the darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. So we need both. We don't know joy without despair. We don't know the light without the dark. We need it all, and it's part of the greater wholeness of life. It's part of all of us. And so that's something else I want us to know, is that all of these attributes of the shadow are so necessary. They're not bad, they're good. They teach us about ourselves. That's what I had that experience in the Donovan prison. It was like, wow, I could see God in the midst of all of this, not knowing what any of them had done. But seeing that there was great possibility in that. There's great possibility in the darkness. It's like this creative soil that we can, grow from and create from. So how are you going to reframe your story right now in life? Whatever it is, whatever your story is now, where is your focus? And how are you going to reframe it to be a more powerful presence of love in the world? How are you going to actively do that? It's so easy for us to talk about it and write about it. But do we embody it? Do we live it? Do we act it out? Bringing the teaching from head to heart. So in closing, this is also from the magazine, when we are able to meet people right where they are, standing in truth, love, harmony, freedom, tolerance, acceptance, and compassion, we will move the world with our conviction of love and radiance. When we have seen the underbelly of a culture, its darkness and its light, the places where it must grow, shift and change, just as these places must within ourselves, I truly believe we have become global citizens. So let us go into prayer. Let us close our eyes for a moment. Allowing yourself to breathe deeply. Knowing that we are surrounded by this one presence, this one life, this one light. It is everywhere present. It is the life of all things, expressing as my life and the life of all people in this room and all over the planet. There is only one. And so what I know for us this day is that we are able to just release the worry, the fear, the lack, the limitation, the scarcity thinking, knowing that all of our needs are met this day. Knowing that everything that we hope for and want and desire is already in our field here and now, for I declare this now. We are connected. We are one with everything and everyone. We are nurtured. We are held. We are guided. We are supported in all of our endeavors. And so we go forth this day in a powerful and magnificent, profound way, knowing that all is truly well here and now, knowing that the darkness truly is a gift for our lives, knowing that the light prevails. So I give thanks for this word and for this prayer. I give thanks for this service. And I know that all is truly well. And so it is. Amen.